1320. Happy to bring in our 1320 49ers insider of the Sacramento Bee, our man Chris Biderman. We can actually just let you into the conversation we were having there during the commercial break. Chris, great to have you here as the regular season is finally here, beginning tonight with the Rams and the Bills. But we were just kind of going over our concerns a little bit about the Chicago Bears organization and Justin Fields. This feels like, I mean, it's the first game of the season. Like this is the 49ers game. Like this is the one concern I have, and Kenny and I talked at length about this yesterday, and curious to hear how you feel about this, is the one area where you can look at Chicago and go, well, they're not that bad, is the defense. And that just leads me to believe, okay, you got a Chicago Bears defense is probably not terrible. You got a sketchy offensive line for the San Francisco 49ers, and you got Trey Lance now taking the helm of this team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, look, I've been saying it, I think, all offseason. Like, I'm fully expecting Kyle Shanahan to do a lot of things that have just been unscouted, right? Mm-hmm. That like similar to the similar dynamic to Robert Griffin in 2012, like coming in, running an offense that people aren't prepared for, and it being pretty successful. And the way they can use Deebo Samuel, the way, Brandon Ayuk can potentially stretch the field. It doesn't sound like George Kittle's going to play, which is certainly a thing. And, was probably an underrated aspect of them starting 3-5 last year was they didn't have Kittle throughout most of that. So that certainly makes it a little bit more difficult, particularly to run the ball. Ultimately, to me, I think the 49ers' success is going to be dependent on how well they run the ball. If those three interior guys can get push and not get knocked back, then it sets a table for everything they want to do offensively. And I'm sure I probably said that on my appearance here last week, but that to me is really what's going to be the indicator. And the Bears, they have some young guys. They do have Roquan Smith, but I'm just expecting Kyle Shanahan to have Matt Eberflus's head spinning a little bit because they're going to be doing things that just haven't been put on tape yet.
You're 100% spot on with that, Chris. I feel the same way. We were talking to Marshall. I just call Marshall. I was about to call him Harrison. I was like, his name is not Marshall Harrison. Marshall Harris, out there formerly of CBS 13, now in Chicago, and he was talking about how, they got some young guys out there, and the defensive coordinator for the Bears is preaching, we're getting to the ball. We're getting to the ball. We're going to be first to the ball in this super aggressive style. And the first thing that came to my mind when I heard that was, oh, that's tailor-made for Kyle Shanahan, because he's going to get you on that overplay and over pursue. And then once he gets you on that once or twice, then he's going to have you starting thinking and looking all over the place, and you don't know what's coming. And if that's the way that they're going to approach this game, that it's right there for Kyle Shanahan to, like you said, have their head spinning all game on the defensive end.
Because so much of what Kyle Shanahan does is about pre-snap eye candy, right, in the backfield, and sending guys in motion and forcing defenses to account for all sorts of things before the snap, while the 49ers are learning basically what coverages the defense is going to be in. Like, that's really the whole purpose of all that pre-snap motion. So, yeah, I think, look, ultimately what gives the 49ers a big advantage this season is just continuity, right? The fact that they've been running the same system for so long with so many of the same players, that they have an advantage over these teams, particularly teams with new coaching staffs like the Bears have, that, they're going to be able to do a bunch of different stuff and have a much more complicated offense with more complicated variations of it than a lot of teams that they're going to go against, including the Bears on Sunday. So to me, there was one practice where 49ers communication staff sent everybody a text message covering the team, like reiterating, hey guys, there's no reporting of scheme or, how players were used. And it was one of those practices that sort of, I don't want to say what the practice looked like, but it reminded me of what the team did in the second half of last year with Deebo Samuel, right? And just all the different ways you could utilize the different guys you have on offense. And so I'm just expecting it to, frankly, from like a schematic perspective, to be really fun to watch, because it's going to be, one guy going this way before the snap, and then the play going the other way, and then there potentially being a couple options there for whoever the ball carrier may or may not be. So I think the offense is going to be, is going to be really tough to stop the first few weeks of the season, because Kyle Shanahan's the type of guy who's been drawing these plays up for a while, and now he finally gets to implement them.
Any concern? I think we learned a few minutes ago. George Kittle didn't practice again today. Any concern about him for the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if he did play at this point. And typically the 49ers are pretty cautious with their main guys, obviously, and they like to, get at least 1 or 2 practices in before having their guys play. And I would say too, they're probably exercising with a certain level of caution here, because they understand how important George Kittle is to the team. And the Bears are probably one of the most beatable teams the 49ers are going to have on their schedule all year. So it wouldn't surprise me if they do hold him out, but I do think it's a substantial loss, particularly given the questions about the offensive line, right? Like if you have Kyle Juszczyk and you have George Kittle in there, you could run left behind Trent Williams and those 2 guys and feel pretty good about that. Mm-hmm. If you don't have George Kittle and you're not winning the edges, which you do basically every time George Kittle is out there and you're running to his side, then, that makes it difficult to run those wide zone runs that they like to do, right? And then the play action off of those wide zone running looks isn't going to be as effective either. And then obviously you're missing what George Kittle brings you in the passing game, which is probably your at first or second most reliable pass catcher, right? I think it's fair to say. So it's a pretty substantial loss if he doesn't play. I do think the 49ers could survive it, but the way the offense is designed is, run the ball, play action, utilize the tight ends, utilize the middle of the field. And obviously George Kittle being one of the best tight ends in the league would be a pretty substantial loss for them. But I don't know that it would ultimately cost the 49ers the game. But I will point out, like I said earlier, when they were 3-5 last year, not having George Kittle was a substantial part of that.
Yeah. I would sit out George Kittle. There's no need to run him out there week 1 if you have championship aspirations, going up against the Bears. No disrespect to them, and just considering his injury history, considering that he repeatedly gets hurt year after year, and that there's something that's bothering him right now that isn't necessarily season threatening. Don't make it something that could eventually be season threatening. Give him the week or 2 that he needs to get that right, so you can possibly have him for the long haul. You talk about Kittle being out last year and why they started 3-5. I was watching the game the other night and I forgot he didn't play in this game last year, the Bears and the Niners game, and that was one of the games that kind of turned around their season. So that they should be able to get it done even without Kittle, and I wouldn't chance it.
Yeah, and they're also putting in a new surface at Soldier Field. So they're putting in a Bermuda grass, which they say is going to be better. But, everybody in the NFL knows that Soldier Field has historically had the worst grass surface in the NFL. And there was complaints about the game, the preseason game. The Chiefs were there in Chicago, which led to them putting a new surface in. And it's an entirely different type of grass, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think the grass is some huge storyline, but if you're thinking about whether or not you want to play your key player and he's dealing with a lower body injury, I'm sure Kyle Shanahan is factoring in the thought that the surface there is typically bad. They're putting in a new surface, which anybody who followed the Levi Stadium situation in 2014, pretty much through 2015 and 16, new grass and dealing with that can be complicated, and it doesn't always go well when you do transition to a new surface. So I'm sure the 49ers are a little bit leery of that as well.
You're listening to D'Lo and KC on KIFM West Sacramento, 98.5 FM KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, driven by Lasher's Elk Grove Dodge. Always live on the free Odyssey app. Chris Biderman, our 1320 49ers insider from the Sacramento Bee, with us here. Before we get to the obvious question that shook up 49ers media yesterday, I do want to ask you, you did this last year. You've got this Candlestick Chronicles beer that drops. I mean, it's a yearly thing now. You do it 2 times in a row. It's a yearly thing. And you and our buddy Kyle Matson host an event. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, you're going to be there, which is awesome. We're super excited to have you there. Last year, it's going to be at Cooperage Brewing Company in Santa Rosa. I'm close with the folks there, and they do a great job if you're into craft beer. And they made a Candlestick Chronicles Hazy IPA, which I think the second run is going to be dropping pretty shortly. The can is incredible, particularly for a 49ers fan. It's like half football. They did a really cool drawing of Candlestick Park that's on the can. And if you're into hazy IPAs, I think it's as good as anything out there. So the live event, it's going to be Kyle and I riffing for a little bit. We're going to bring up some live. We're going to have a live panel. It's going to include Damien. We're going to have Matt Mayoko and Cam Inman and Tracy Sandler and hopefully some others. But we're going to raise some money for charity, and it's going to be a really fun event. If it was anything like last year, it's going to be a really fun event. And people ask, like, are you guys going to record the pod? And like, no, because we're all going to be drinking, and people like to get a little bit more spicy in those scenarios when they know what they're saying is off the record. And so that's what happened a little bit last year. There was some spicy takes getting thrown around, and it's a lot of fun. It's good beer, good people, and doing it to raise a little bit of money for good causes. So September 16th, Friday before the home opener, a week from tomorrow. So it'll be a good time.
Excellent. I just looked up the driving directions from my house to Santa Rosa on a Friday afternoon, so I should be there by Saturday.
You need to leave
yeah.
If y'all just hang around a little bit longer,
we'll make it worth your while. If you want to get there early for lunch, we can do that too.
I'll be there Saturday morning for the big event. So there's that. And they couldn't afford Casey's talent fee. That's the only reason.
Don't listen to this man.
His people are hard to get a hold of.
They needed the driver, and he wanted a certain type of car, and then the helicopter the rest of the way. It was tough.
The Fiji water.
Yeah. So, Chris, Kenny and I were the only ones. We acknowledged, we apologized. We did the sports media thing wrong yesterday. We were the only ones who didn't make a big deal out of Trey Lance not being a captain, but there are other people who got 4 hours of content out of that story. It made perfect sense to me. What was your reaction when you saw the 6 captains named yesterday?
So when you have a team that's loaded with a lot of established stars, I guess you can say, like the 49ers are, a couple All-Pros, a potential Hall of Famer in Trent Williams, it would be weird if on that team you gave captaincy to a guy who started 2 games in his career. Right? Like, what do all the captains have in common? They've done it on the field, right? And they're part of being a captain. A big part of it is, for Kyle Shanahan especially, is all about preparation, professionalism, how you practice, how you take care of your body, how you just handle yourself away from the field. And also you have to be a kick-ass player between the lines, right? Giving Trey Lance a captaincy is sort of ignoring that whole process. Like, not that he handles himself poorly away from the field or isn't professional or anything like that. He just hasn't earned any stripes yet. So I don't find it problematic at all that Trey Lance isn't a starter. I would find it really weird if he, or captain, excuse me. I would find it really weird if he was given a captaincy. And like, Nick Bosa is a rookie. He wasn't made captain. He wasn't made captain his second year. And you can make a case he's one of the 49ers' 2 best players, right? So he's a captain this year, obviously, but no, I don't make a big deal out of it. I think one thing, and this sort of speaks to, I think, a lot of the Trey Lance discourse that's been happening. The 49ers signed Jimmy Garoppolo. Oh, well, it must be because they don't believe in Trey Lance. Oh, the 49ers didn't give Trey Lance captaincy. Oh, it must be because they don't believe in Trey Lance. Kyle Shanahan has never been the type of coach that just gives things to young players without those players earning it. Whether it's, the confidence to say, yeah, we don't need a good backup behind you, or a captaincy. It's like that player has to go earn it, and then that's when that player is rewarded for it. So like, he's very much not the type of coach who would say, yeah, Trey Lance, you're our starting quarterback, you're our captain. And I think the locker room understands that. And I think the locker room has a really healthy dynamic, and it's not problematic at all from where I sit and talking to players. It never seems like there's drama in any of that stuff. And it is probably blown out of proportion. If the 49ers were a rebuilding team coming off a 4-13 season, and they had just drafted Trey Lance and made him their starter, like, yeah, that would make sense. But this is a team loaded with a lot of really good players who have a lot of experience, and Trey Lance just doesn't. So it would be sort of skipping the process and awarding a guy who hasn't earned those stripes yet. And so I don't see any problem with it. I understand why it's a discussion point, but to me, I don't find it problematic at all from the standpoint of Trey Lance not being a captain.
I don't understand it at all, Chris. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. Why is it like this with Trey Lance? And what I mean by that is, like, why is everything indicative of the biggest scenario in the world? And I talked about this yesterday, and Damian, we were trying to figure it out. Why, when people talk about Trey Lance, does it skew towards he won't be good? Like, we don't know what's going to go on with Trey Lance. I think he might be good, but the fact of the matter is we don't know what's going on with him. We don't know how he's going to be. But why is that not good enough? Why does it have to skew towards the boogeyman of him not being good, and now they're going to have to play Jimmy and all this other stuff? Why are people like this with Trey Lance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think people are only comfortable with what they've seen before, right? So, like, nobody's seen Trey Lance do it really at any level. Like, he had a really nice season in 2019 at North Dakota State, but that was a long time ago, right? And there are questions about his accuracy, and nobody really knows, if he's going to be good or not. I'm very optimistic about Trey Lance, and it's largely just reflective on Kyle Shanahan and the pieces around Trey Lance. And I think Kyle Shanahan wouldn't be putting Trey Lance in this position if he didn't believe in him, right? And this is the biggest bet Kyle Shanahan's made in his career on Trey Lance. Like, if Trey Lance does not pan out and the 49ers somehow are not a winning team because largely of what happens under center, then that could cost Kyle Shanahan his job, right? Like, that's not a small thing. And Kyle Shanahan is making a bet on trying to win the Super Bowl this year, and he's doing it with Trey Lance as a starting quarterback. Like, I think that, to me, should be enough of a vote of confidence for people to understand, like, yeah, we haven't seen it from him yet, but that doesn't mean it's not going to work, right? And we see it. Patrick Mahomes didn't start his rookie season. Was that some great indictment on Patrick Mahomes? Like, they had Alex Smith. It was a very similar situation, a very similar dynamic to what the 49ers have. That Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes dynamic is similar to what the Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance dynamic is, or at least was the first year. Now it's flipped with Jimmy being back. But I just think that, people are generally uncomfortable with what they haven't seen, and Kyle Shanahan is making Trey Lance earn, like, the captaincy stuff, the Jimmy Garoppolo, saying Jimmy Garoppolo shouldn't be here because we need Trey Lance to be the starter unencumbered. Trey Lance just hasn't earned it yet. And that's not to say that he won't, but this is a Super Bowl roster in Kyle Shanahan's mind, and he's not going to let a Trey Lance injury derail that. But in terms of people not believing in Trey, like, you want to talk about quarterback tropes that have been an issue in the NFL, related to skin color since the dawn of time, right? Like, you want to talk about just typically what it looks like. Like, I don't know. I think there's certainly an element of that, and certainly an element of, the 49ers quarterback position is one of the most scrutinized positions, I would say, in all of sports, certainly in Northern California sports. So I do think that's a big part of it. And frankly, like, it's kind of a polarizing situation because Jimmy Garoppolo still is there, and Jimmy Garoppolo's been pitted against, or those two guys have been pitted against each other since Trey Lance was drafted. And then you have Trey Lance being pitted against the other quarterbacks in the 2021 class. Like, people are just uncomfortable with believing in things that they haven't seen yet. And I'm really optimistic because, of what Kyle Shanahan can do with somebody like Trey Lance, and what all the weapons can do around Trey Lance. And the fact that, like, have we seen a quarterback dropped into a better situation in his first year as a starter, like, in the last 20 years?
You might have just named the guy who's the closest in Patrick Mahomes. Like, there were some expectations for that team, and certainly it's a far cry from what Justin Fields is dealing with over in Chicago.
Yeah, so the accuracy issue is a big one because we don't typically see quarterbacks overcome being inaccurate with the exception being Josh Allen, who went from, sort of a guy that nobody thought would be good coming into the draft because he didn't play high level competition. He was inaccurate. He fixed his accuracy, and now he's the betting favorite to be MVP. People are just more comfortable with seeing it first before they're willing to make a bet on it.
This just dawned on me when you said this a second ago, where you're talking about guys want, you want Trey Lance to be that starting quarterback unencumbered, and you got Jimmy Garoppolo in that second position, and you don't want that. If you're on the 49ers staff, or you're a fan, or you're a media member who feels like Jimmy Garoppolo is going to hinder Trey Lance ain't the guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if this falls apart for Trey Lance because Jimmy Garoppolo is in the backup quarterback position, Trey Lance isn't the guy, and that's okay. You need to move on. I don't think that that's the case at all, and I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play less than zero of a factor in how Trey Lance performs. But we come up with all of these different reasons as to why we've been saying the same things over and over and over again about this quarterback position, and it's like, yo, just say what you mean. Some of y'all don't believe in Trey Lance. That's all it boils down to. For whatever reason, you don't believe in Trey Lance. You were doing this before Jimmy Garoppolo was the backup quarterback. You've been doing this all off season long. You don't believe in him, and that's fine. I do. I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I also think to your point, like if the locker room gets divided over the quarterback situation, like that's a locker room problem. That's not a Trey Lance quarterback problem. That's like, why are those guys, say one of the starting receivers is unhappy after a loss because he has one catch for 8 yards. If he's spouting out to the media and then that causes a divide in all this discussion, that's a problem with that receiver. And like Kyle Shanahan needs to have a conversation with him. Mm-hmm. It's not a Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo problem. Mm-hmm. Right. So and that's the thing. They bet on their culture. And to this point, over the last few years, their culture has ultimately been a reason why they've been successful when they have been. And when they haven't been, it's been about, injuries mostly. So I do believe in like the strength of just the quality human beings in the locker room. I do think that there are probably some wild cards that, we'll have to see how it all goes from that standpoint. But yeah, I don't think, the more I've thought about it, I was a little dubious about the decision to bring Garoppolo back when it first happened. And the more I thought about it, the more I talked to people, it's like, it's just a pragmatic decision, man. And I think everybody in the locker room understands that because their goal is to win the Super Bowl. And, if Trey Lance sprains his ankle and is out 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to have a much better chance at winning the games that you need to win with Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback than Brock Purdy.
Right. Yes, definitely. Definitely. I'm ready, Chris. Come on, man. I'm ready, baby.
Yeah, and look, once the games are played, then we can talk about that and not speculate on any, that like I love the NFL. Covering the NFL has been a lifelong dream of mine, and I'm super lucky to be able to do it when I can. But also, like, it sucks when there aren't games and we're just speculating like nonstop, which is what it's been for months and months and months. So fortunately, this weekend the rubber's going to hit the road and we'll have actual games to talk about.
Yeah.
Cooperage Brewing Company, 1 week from tomorrow, round 7-ish or so. Cooperage Brewing Company in Santa Rosa, a live edition of Candlestick Chronicles with Chris Biderman and Kyle Matson. Myself, I'll just be serving the beers to these guys and a whole host of 49ers panelists. So it'll be a good time. Chris, we appreciate you. Real quick, we're sports media. You got a Super Bowl prediction before you go?
I haven't done this yet. Am I a complete homer if I have the 49ers going to the Super Bowl?
Absolutely not.
Nothing wrong with it.
I look at the NFC and I have a hard time believing in the Packers more so this year than years past because of Devontae Adams. I have a hard time believing in Tampa. The Rams, it's incredibly hard to repeat. I just think the 49ers are in a spot where they can really make a run at it. And I like Baltimore in the AFC.
Wow. I like it. I like
Baltimore in the AFC. They're
1320 49ers insider, Chris Biderman right there. That's good stuff. I like that. I wonder if that's the last time we'll hear that Super Bowl.